for the Injustice League. It's going to be epic. What a cracking show we have planned for you today, guys. This one is going to be awesome because we are going to adventure into probably one of the most exciting technology spaces at the moment, and that's blockchain. More specifically, I'm more excited actually about the guest that we have on the show today. He's been courting me for some time now. I've been trying to get his money. But his name is none other than Tim Ohlsen. Tim, welcome to the show, buddy. Welcome, bro.
Good to see you, Matt.
Likewise, dude.
I need to get used to this mic thing.
I know. Fuck, welcome, bro. So look, welcome. It's been a while, hey?
Yeah, I was just saying, I was driving past your house so many times. Now I know where you are.
Speaking of driving, we have to get the elephant out the room because I told the guys what car you drive, and Bradley literally got a hard on straight away. So please walk me through your process. You're 31 years old, the tender age of 31, right? I was still gallivanting on super yachts and traveling the world.
What a tough life that must have been.
I know. So it was actually hard work, bro, I must say, but super awesome and so forth. But 31 years old, I wasn't exactly driving a McLaren. But walk me through the process. Like, why the fucking on earth did you buy a McLaren? The 458s? Come on, dude. Hey?
I didn't want to do what everyone else does, and I just love engineering. So anything that was like slightly different, there we go. Anything that was slightly different, love technology, and that kind of like ticked all the boxes for me. So it was a very easy choice.
Yeah, well, I would love to go in your car one day. Brad, what's up?
Can we swap your chairs? If you don't mind, because that one's squeaking quite a bit.
Is it? Okay, yeah, sure, let's swap it up. Brad. That's what we do on the show. Thanks, Brad, for the heads up. Can we just kill Mav's microphone for now? Cool, dude. So tell us a little bit about Tim Ohlsen, the man, the legend.
Well, no one really knows who I am. And
This is actually true. I remember the first time we met each other, it was kind of like, I'm not really on social media. I don't really do Twitter. You're very much flying under the radar, but you're doing some very, very big things. And I find that quite interesting as a dichotomy to explore. So why aren't you like this persona, entrepreneur? When by all accounts, if you know Tim Ohlsen, like I know you and your network knows you, like you that guy. It's just ironic that you're not the digital footprint dude.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose it's actually one of the things that and you and I spoke about this a couple of months ago, things that I might want to change. But, if I think back for the last 10 years, because I've been in business for 10 years now, I've had various startups I've been involved in, and I've always liked the story of the underdog. And I think the obviously social media as a platform has got an immense amount of power for you to leverage and get your name out there and get your personal brand, your business out there. There's no denying that. But it's more around, also keeping very quiet about what you do and how you do it in such a way that the bigger competition, especially in my space, which is incredibly competitive and very cash intensive, like being the underdog, I think has served us well up until now. So
cool, man.
It's just a strategy that we decided to choose and we kind of follow through on.
Yeah, nothing wrong with that, man. How are you doing on levels and stuff, guys? Good? Okay, cool. Yeah, so let's talk about what you are doing. So what I find fascinating is that you're a big energy play, which is really interesting. So Eldo Energy is being your company. But before we dive into the specifics about what you're doing, which I find incredibly exciting as a opportunity for the average man in the street and woman in the street to get access to affordable energy, God bless Telkom. Eskom, whatever. They're all the same for me, dude. You know what I mean? They're all broke. But let's go back to the beginning. Like, you obviously went to UCT and studied something really fancy out there.
Finance and economics.
Finance and economics. But why energy?
Worthless degree.
But why energy? Like, what made you get up one morning and go, energy has a really big problem and I'm the guy to go out there and actually fix this for everyone? Like, why and how did that come about?
So I actually kind of stumbled into the opportunity. It was final year at varsity, 2008. We just started getting load shedding and a lot of lectures were cancelled, which was amazing at the time. Everyone was like, yes, hope Eskom burns more to the ground. So I just applied basic economic principles. If there isn't enough supply to meet the demand, like inevitably prices are going to go up. And this wasn't a short-term crunch. It was a fundamental shift in our peak demand profile in the entire country. And Eskom was just struggling to meet the demand. So I was doing an entrepreneurship course in my honors year, and we had to develop a business plan. I thought, like, what business do you choose? And kind of it coincided with this idea that I had, and I just thought, why not? Why not choose sort of energy efficiency, how businesses can save on rising electricity costs and kind of like protect themselves and their bottom lines. And that ended up being a business plan I submitted. And then after I did it, and I thought, maybe I shouldn't go the corporate route. I wasn't doing a CA anyway, but I didn't really want to do accounting. So I thought, let me maybe start a business. Both my parents were entrepreneurs, so it wasn't that foreign to me. But I just kind of fell in from there.
So you mentioned that you actually did a course in entrepreneurship. I mean, I have to ask you, because I get asked this fucking question all the time, which is, are you born an entrepreneur, or is it something that you can teach anyone? Like, what's your take on that?
I think it's a bit of both. I think one of the defining characteristics of an entrepreneur is that you just go to the nth degree. Like, there's never a no. You always make a plan, and that's a personality trait that you cannot teach. You can teach the basics, the fundamentals, but like if you don't have that intrinsically in you, you're just never going to go like that extra mile to do whatever you can.
Yeah. You're not going to like sell your shirt off your back to make it, basically. Exactly. You know what I mean? You'll quit when shit gets real, right?
Exactly.
Cool. So there you are, you're studying economics and so forth, and now you've got this energy idea. Like, where do you go from there? Because for me, like, I've obviously started quite a few companies, some of which obviously failed and a couple I sold. But like, for me, energy is just such a big thing. It's like, you don't get to play small in energy. Like, if you're going to go and mix with the big boys, like, you got to hit hard and you got to hit fast. You need massive amounts of capital. You need a scalable business model. Somehow it needs to be completely different, the underlying business model, right? Am I speaking sense? To make this thing truly disruptive, right? So, I mean, where did you go from there? Like, you didn't have a rep, you didn't have staff, you didn't have capital. Like, walk us through the steps that you took to kind of get to where you are today.
So you got to bear in mind, this was like 10 years ago, right? So technology 10 years ago was also very, very different, especially around software, and which is really what the core of the business is now. But, back then, the first thing I actually did when I thought this was a great idea is I tried to get a meeting with one of the major guys at Eskom. And like, that was a bit of a process. It took me about 2 months, but my first meeting I ever had for the business concept was actually with one of the major managers at Eskom. I flew up to Joburg for the day, and I was like, put on my suit, and I pitched him on this idea. And he actually thought it was actually great. He says, like, this is exactly what we're looking for. We're looking at how can we ironically tell our customers to save energy so that we make less money. But there are lots of industrial users, lots of commercial users, and from there basically validated my idea. And then it was a sequence of speaking to suppliers, because I was still very much, it wasn't around the consulting really. It was more about technology. So what light bulbs can I source? What equipment can I import from overseas to try and help these customers save money? And we always had a very agnostic approach. So it wasn't like I had to sell this specific light bulb. It was more like, we have a couple of suppliers, we'll work with them, we'll get the technology and we'll install them, maintain them, and the customer gets the benefit of the savings. But it kind of just really happened organically from there. Just once you get a bit of confidence and you start pitching to customers and you start picking up the phone and cold calling and being rejected a few times, like you just pick yourself up and you just go from there.
But walk me through, like, as if I was 5 years old, like, what were you trying to do? Were you just trying to, like, basically enable the delivery or an access to electricity cheaper than anybody else? Was that pretty much the premise? Or
so energy as a sector and utilities as a sector is extremely broad. So you've got everything from like generation, which is access to electricity, renewable solar PV, whether it's for household or business, or even utility grade, which are like those large massive plants in Northern Cape. Then you have the network side, which is how that power and utilities get distributed. And then you've got the customer. So those are the three fundamental pillars in what the value chain represents. Now, my journey in the last 10 years literally is kind of like evolved from the one to the next. And then we kind of took a step back and we said, cool, like, this is the perspective that we now have. How do we leverage this? And this takes us more into what the business does now. But back then it was more around, Eskom was going to increase prices. And back then the increases were 25-30% a year. So the sheer media coverage and the actual pressure that Eskom was going to put on local businesses was huge. Suddenly you've got this utility line item, electricity cost, that's going to rise 30% next year, and then another 30%. And that kind of compounds forward. So, kind of like that was the big driver. It was like, how can businesses save? Knowing that Eskom is going to increase prices, what technology can they install to actually save money? And that was the initial starting point of the business.
So it was an idea though, right?
It was an idea. It was a complete idea.
Yeah. So how did you go about, I want to get into funding in a second because there's a big, massive thing that you're doing at the moment. But perception's obviously quite important, right? Yeah. And as an energy player, you can't exactly walk into a boardroom acting like a startup, right? Especially when you're dealing with Eskom, you know what I'm saying? So how did you go about building your street cred? Like what were the steps that you took there?
So I think it was a combination of just a good balance of know-how. So obviously I had to have depth, and I would often pitch to engineers, and engineers really get deep, and I'm not an engineer, but I needed to understand the technology. So really got into like a lot of the electrical engineering fundamentals. But it was also perception. Like when you pull up a PowerPoint, you're meeting, a couple of directors or engineers at a company, you're pitching them a solution of how they can save money, and they go, cool, tell us how can I save? I mean, for you to sell savings is like a no-brainer. It's actually one of the other ironies in the whole industry. But once you start pitching and you get more comfortable, and you kind of give the audience a sense that you know what you're talking about, it kind of like, that was for me my first bit of cred. Like immediately on the surface, people got to know that, okay, Tim and the guys, they know what they're talking about.
So you were basically speaking their language, right?
Yes.
So even though it, I suppose from a practical application perspective, you were nowhere near the perception you were actually,
Exactly.
But it was one speaking their own language. What else did you do?
Look, it's always hard in that sector to get that first customer, to get that first big blue chip that kind of becomes your anchor. And we just happened to fall into a couple of good opportunities because timing was right, our messaging was right, and it kind of gave us a lot of momentum. So we would leverage like good customer case studies, good customer profiles to try and get us into the next project. So, and that just comes down to sales. There isn't necessarily an art. Like, I don't think you can close every single deal. But you just have to also get the timing right. You need to deal with hopefully the right person on the other end of the table who actually is willing and able to make a commitment. I mean, we've had projects where customers would take 18 months to put pen to paper and they didn't have to pay anything because everything was funded through rebates. So you kind of look at yourself and go, really? I'm not selling you snake oil. I'm actually selling you something that's going to save you money and you don't have to pay for it. But why is it taking you 18 months? So not every deal is a guaranteed deal, but obviously getting those critical ones to build your base and then taking those and leveraging those to the next level. And then I think actually fundamentally it's more being hungry enough to go to that next level, because you can always remain at this, like, I'm just going to give a figure, R1 million deal, and then you can be quite comfortable and that's all you do. But how do you go from R1 million to 5 million rand, 5 million to 10 million? So that kind of builds up over time.
So is it just a case of accretion, which is what Eric Kruger preaches? I'm sure you know him. And basically accretion, for those of you who don't know, is basically the process of kind of like compounded interest. But in the context of entrepreneurship, it's about doing the small things every day that add up to bigger and bigger deals. Right?
100%, yeah.
So you're saying that was pretty much your approach, right? It was very much okay, we did 7 figures, now we're going to do, the next bigger deal and the next one after that, right? Okay. So I'm going to talk more around hunger in a second, but before we do that, I want to just dive into a quote of the day because I think it's relevant here. Okay, cool. Let's do this. Okay, so our quote of the day is, Tim, off to you, Brad.
Success is not final. Failure is not fatal. It's the courage to continue that counts.
Cool. So how have you applied this in your own business?
So for me, success is like it's an evolution. I don't think there's actually an end point. And you also, as you mature as an entrepreneur, you kind of validate what success is in your own mind. Many people have an idea what success means, but personal life, family, business, traction, all of those things are also quite important. Every business has failures. I've had customers literally drop out with signed contracts and you go back to ground zero. I've had projects just like disappear from underneath us. And, there's nothing that you can really do. There's certain things that are out of your control. But what you realize once you fall a couple of times, that you can only fall so far. You can only I can see the ground here. I know that that's as far as I'm going to fall. So as long as I pick myself up, that there is another opportunity. So I think people kind of have this perception that when you fail, that's it. You kind of you've written, it's game over. In fact, it's just, you just have to look at it from another perspective and say, cool, if I pick myself up, this is the lesson I've actually learned, and how can I then, apply that going forward? And in my business, I've had many, many of those instances over the last 10 years. I mean, it's just, the list is countless. But
it's funny though, because you learn that lesson at different times. And I think as long as you learn it at some point, it doesn't really matter when.
Look, I'm still learning.
Yeah, well, when are we not,
Yeah,
dude?
exactly.
Let's be honest,
it's like,
right?
And, look at even guys like Elon Musk, one of the most established businesses in the world, poster child of trying to change, what our generation is going to potentially remember as being leapfrog moments. But look at all the hype and the bad press around what's going on there at the moment. So, it doesn't matter how big or how small you are, it's all relative. And you always have setbacks and letdowns.
It's funny because just last night, a friend of mine posted on Facebook, I won't mention her name, but basically she was like, I finally, at 39 years old, I've finally gotten over my fear of failure. You know what I mean? And I was like, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You're 31, some people learn it when they're 12. Do you know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
But it's funny though, because people seem to think that you, I say some people, right, out there, and this is a pretty ridiculous mindset to have, I suppose. But you think that successful people haven't failed. They somehow managed to jump and avoid all the minefields on their way to success.
It doesn't happen.
No,
and in fact, everyone fails, and that's exactly the point. It's they fail, and the reason why they are where they are is because they always continued. And that's actually the last line. It's the courage to actually go ahead and push on and navigate through the next chapter. I mean, that's just part of the journey.
Yeah. I mean, what's been your biggest failure to date? I mean, and it's a hard one. It's a hard one, right? When it's just, it's all molds into one for me sometimes. But if you were to pick one, what was it? What was that failure? And what did you learn about yourself in that process?
Sure. That is a tough one. I'm trying to be diplomatic.
Don't do that, Jay.
So my first business effectively got absorbed into another business, and it grew fairly well for the first 2.5 years. And then we kind of had a couple of setbacks again. Most of my setbacks in the business have been due to customers not paying or contracts falling away, especially if you don't have cash. If you're not sitting on investment money, it's very difficult to grow your business with enough of a lifeline. So you live your business in quarterly intervals instead of this is my budget for the year. I know I'm going to be safe. So as a result of that small setback, basically, we got effectively asked to leave that business by the majority shareholder who absorbed us into their company. And within the space of 2 weeks, basically, I had no business anymore. I had no clients. I had no staff. And if I think back about that time, and it's actually so funny because obviously hindsight is always 20/20. But if I think about that time, the biggest lesson for me was I really fucked this one up. What could I have done better? What we could have recruited more customers. I could have been less blasé because we kind of got a bit displaced, and I was still very young at that time.
How old were you, by the way?
I was 25.
So this was a company you built, and then someone acquired you? Or
yeah, it was basically a merger. It was basically alignment of visions and a merger. Yeah.
So, but it all fell apart, right?
It all fell apart.
That sucks, dude.
Yeah.
Was it because you didn't follow legal advice? Was it the case that but I don't know, most youngsters are arrogant I was?
So I think I was a bit naive. He was the majority shareholder, so he had the purse strings.
And the voting rights, I suppose.
Exactly. And, to this day, I've still met him many times, and I think it was one of the best things that ever happened to me. Not only from a lesson perspective, but also in terms of changing my whole outlook in terms of what I want to do in terms of my career. So it was a great stepping stone for where I'm today. I'm very grateful, and like I said, the relationship is still very, very good. But I think it really came down to us being a bit too naive, not having the right legal grounds. And he did what probably any other well-established businessman would have done. Just like say, cool, I put in money, the client is pulled out, I need to recapitalize, I'm going to dilute you guys down to X value. That X value just wasn't attractive for us anymore. And, like hard decisions had to be made. It just was done in a very, very short space of time. But I think, like I said, great lesson, and it kind of taught me some good fundamentals that I used for the current business I have.
Yeah, I'm sure there's lessons you'll take forward into the next one, right? But I mean, how did you pick yourself up? I'm fascinated by this because I mean, Joey Evans, for instance, I mean, that I don't know if you've listened to that show. Basically, you were told you would never walk again, and 10 years later, you finished the Dakar Rally. Like, I love that shit where you basically are, to use Rocky's expression, like hit hard down to the canvas, whether that's in your situation or my situation when I was literally lost my shirt through a failed business, where you financially and spiritually broken, like when you really are fucked, and you don't want to get out of bed, like that's a very real thing for a lot of guys, and for a lot of girls out there too. So what did you do to pick yourself up? Like, how did you then regroup and go, okay, cool, I'm not broken. I'm not going to be the victim, and I'm going to like come out the other side stronger. Like, what did you do?
To be honest, I think that really comes down to personality. Because if you have a setback, it just depends on how you interpret that setback and like how you intrinsically drive yourself to try and get out of that hole. And for me, it was just like a knee-jerk reaction. It was like, cool, this happened, shit, like, yes, that first week was like, fuck, what am I going to do? Can't touch customers. Like, so any relationship I established, can't go to them. How do I start another business in the same space, but have no springboard, no salary, no network, no savings, just like, ground zero.
Yeah.
So yeah, I got up and I started cold calling, really. I remember I was living in a complex, and there was a shopping center next door, and I thought, let me just walk across, because at the time I also didn't have a car. I mean, this is kind of like
did you lose your car also? What else
I didn't have a car.
Okay.
I didn't actually end up having a car because I wasn't making enough money. I mean, as an entrepreneur, and this was before Uber. Uber would have changed my life back then. I had to rent an Avis car to get some of my meetings. So anyway, I remember literally walking to the shopping center next door, and it wasn't even a block away. And I just went there and I just like walked around, had a look at their lights, and I had a look at like their metering. I just went to the shopping center manager, and I said, look, I've just had a look around. I spent about half an hour here. I think there's some stuff that you can do. Are you interested? And he said, I didn't show me. So I walked around with him. He says, cool, give me a proposal and I'll put you in touch with the boss. And then I got in touch with the boss, and then, that was like my first big one, or big relative, but that was a bit of a starting point. And then I just started going to bigger corporates again from scratch, just guys I hadn't approached before. I specifically, so maybe this was also one of my stronger lessons from the first business, was I specifically started leveraging and valuing partnerships more. So I basically started recruiting a lot of good big partners. So like when the perception of who is Tim, who's my business, who's behind you, I could then say, look, these are our partners. And the partners, because they like the approach and they weren't really in the space, actually were very keen on that kind of idea. So that I think also really worked well and kind of gave me confidence, because, if a big listed JSE company says, cool, we are in health and safety, but, we can introduce you to our customers. If you just tell us what you do and how you do it and we can leverage it, like, sure, we can do it. So that just happened organically, really.
How do you protect the downsides in partnerships? Because
this is a good topic.
Yeah, it's a very fucking good one.
Sorry guys, the ladies want to know why aren't you facing the camera?
Oh, okay.
Hello, ladies.
I'll pay attention.
I did listen, ladies. Just for the record, this is the map around. I did brief Tim to look directly at the camera intermittently.
It is so hard because I always converse like this. So. Yeah. Okay, I'll pay more attention.
So so partnerships are an interesting one for me, because I've gone down that road. I think you can get scale really quickly.
Absolutely,
through
yeah.
partnerships.
Absolutely,
and I think if you have a really good dogman, you know how to structure a partnership contractually, very important. But I think prior to even getting there, it's to understand the motivations of the partner that you're getting in bed with. Because for me, and you can just please feel free if you don't agree and don't share my views, but a partnership is pretty much the same as having a business partner, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's just that you're not an equity owner or whatever the case is, or have somewhere to draw dividends out on a potential shareholding. Just kill the volume there, bud. The ringer. Yeah. So partnerships, they're such a minefield, dude. And like with you, it's I've just done a partnership now with the bank here, right, for content. And but for you, it's like chalk and cheese. Like for me, my 7 figures is like, okay, it's quite a big deal. But for you, you're doing like hundreds of millions in deal flow in any given. I mean, God knows what your cash flow situation must be like when you're dealing with government and parastatals and stuff, and your float and how much you have to carry. I mean, that number's got to be like hundreds of millions a month, right? So, like, let's start at the beginning. Someone wants to get in bed with the potential partner. What are the first things that need to look at?
Just what are the strengths of the relationship? So what do they offer? What do you offer? What can they bring to the party that you do not have and you need to leverage? I mean, often as an entrepreneur, you are the underdog. And this is where, like in my case, I leverage a partnership to get me to that next level. So the partner couldn't have been someone who was smaller than me. The partner was always someone who could provide me more value than I could provide them, in theory. If, however, they're also not in the space like what you're doing with the content in the bank now, there's a value proposition there. So as long as you're providing real value, you are then able to leverage that partnership effectively. But it's got to have good commercial grounds to stipulate scope of work on your side, scope of work on their side, and then just make sure it's aligned. Okay. But also, not every partnership works. I mean, I've had many that didn't work, but the credibility definitely was useful.
Okay, cool. Just hold on one sec. What's going on there, Mav? Turn the ring on. Turn the ring on.
Having some major IT problems here today, huh?
Okay, plug it on, plug it out and in again, Mav. Cool. So let's get back to partnership. So it's about stacking your value, I suppose, in that partnership, right? Yeah. Because I suppose the partner getting in bed with you as the entrepreneur, you somehow need to, I suppose, structure the value so that the partner, whether they're licensing content or whether they're getting in bed or opening up their network with you, feels like they're the ones that are going to win, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's especially lucrative if it's a domain that they don't understand. They're like, it kind of aligns with their core business and they can see value for them. Either it's through brand recognition or through additional revenue streams or through just diversified service offering. Like all those things are typically factors that you can leverage.
Okay. What are some of the watch outs for? So
in partnerships.
Yeah. So I've got basically here, I'll give you some more context. So with this bank, we had a 27-page sponsorship agreement, right? Essentially where we retain IP and the bank licenses it and et cetera, et cetera. So then the bank was like, look, we're not comfortable signing a 27-page document. We want to move on this project ASAP. So can you give us an executive summary? So what does that put me in? Puts me in a bit of a blind spot, right? Because how do you remove all the required clauses which make it essentially your insurance policy on work that you're doing as a result of this partnership? And so now you want the business, right? So what I've done is I've said to my lawyers, I said, listen, can you just draft a 3-page, just short thing, just to make sure that the deal is going to take 4 months to go through legal, but we can just get the deal and ultimately the partnership in play and actually in the business and so on and so forth. Because a lot of this stuff just takes so fucking long, right? So
legals can take forever, especially if you're dealing with corporates.
How did you do it, bro? Like I've heard of I was talking about IMG because we're very much in the talent space now. And IMG, my lawyer has actually seen one of their contracts and they're like 100 pages long. Do you know what I'm saying?
No, it's insane. I mean, some of our SLAs are also nuts and you have them when you need them. So it's not like every single contract needs a strong, robust SLA. What I actually prefer is to try and make the legals as easily understandable as possible, which basically means that they need to be written technically not by a lawyer. It needs to have someone who's got a bit of a narrative to it. So it's an easy read. Because what you want to do, whoever your key accounts person is, they need to read and understand because they're your advocate. They're the ones to say, cool, Matt, I want to do a deal with you. So let me go to legal, and legal mustn't throw the book at me because I know exactly what the terms of references are in terms of how we're going to interact with you. So for me, the better framework for legal contracting, again, has its place, so it doesn't always apply, is to have a very short framework, and it's a framework agreement that basically outlines who owns the customer, who owns the IP, payment terms, profit sharing terms, those fundamentals. And then you have everything else in an annexure. Because an annexure allows you to also iterate it over time. And it allows you to not throw the book into the lawyer's court and say, legal, all of us. It's to say these are certain elements that are fundamental for us to get a foot in. Because I think the biggest point, and again, one of my big lessons was you don't have to sell the whole ship. You can basically go into a customer and you must be able to leave with something, a deal. And a small deal can become a bigger deal just through relationships. So as long as you can get your foot in and get the first contract signed, you can providing value. They're going to see your value, assuming you do provide value, right?
Yeah, totally.
Then you can scale that from there.
Dude, I love that because we were saying just before on air about scale. And sometimes in order to scale, you actually have to do the things that don't scale. Yeah. It's almost like to start small and go, listen, guys, here's an executive summary. It literally says how much, what you're paying for, what are the terms of service, the scope of work, essentially. Very executive summary type thing. But then here's the annexure, wherever that lives. And this can be a working thing that we can revisit and re-sign.
And iterate. And then you just, as long as both of you sign, then you're safe. Yeah. You're still bound by the framework agreement.
Mm-hmm. Okay, cool. Let's do the knockout punch. You can ring this bell, dude. Okay, dude. So what is your top tip for entrepreneurs when it comes to business? Something that any entrepreneur right now can apply in their business today that will make a positive difference to them.
So it kind of will appeal to especially guys who are thinking about starting something, then guys who have got something, or I think it does cater for both, is one, you can start small. For you to go from a paying job or no job to starting a business doesn't mean that you need to have an office, staff. You don't need to have any of those luxuries, in fact, because all you really need is the mindset to say that you are going to do this, you're committing to it, and you're going to go out and try and sell customers on what you're trying to sell. And as soon as you bank the first deal, it gives you confidence, and you use that, you leverage it for the second deal. And as long as you're constantly pursuing growth, I think starting small is the best way to look at starting anything, because you don't want to look down the rabbit hole of all the issues that come with being an entrepreneur. Otherwise, no one will get out of bed. I mean, you just want to curl up in a ball and die. But if you literally said, okay, this is what I need to do tomorrow, and that's what you do tomorrow, and that tomorrow is going to get you to the next day, that's a perfect starting point. Uh-huh. And linked to that is start small and monitor your cash flow. Because just like what you were saying earlier, even if you are small, your cash flow is relative. You're chasing $500, you're chasing 1,000 Rand, like that's important depending on what stage you are in your business. And just because you get bigger doesn't mean your problems go away either. And that's kind of like the world that I'm living in now, where I'm not big, and I would say probably more small to medium. But as a business, like the creditors, the customers you don't pay, the debtors, like all of those things grow relatively. So it's not like you ever get away from that. It's just you need to manage your cash flow. And as long as you manage it closely, it doesn't mean that it always works out, because you can plan for the nth degree and someone still lets you down. I've had a contingency plan with 3 sources of payments from customers, all 3 of them fall away. Then what? There's nothing I could have done. Yeah. I pestered them enough, and I negotiate with them, but there's only so much you can do. But cash flow and start small, I think, are 2 fundamental things.
The funny thing about cash flow is most people think that, or some entrepreneurs, I should say, quite a lot of them actually think that cash flow is only a thing that a small business has in terms of a problem. And that's totally untrue. Robbi Brozen started Nando. He had like 38 stores, right? And he couldn't pay his staff.
It literally, cash flow problems scale.
Yeah, exactly.
It's all relative.
Yeah, you will never not have a cash flow problem.
Unless you literally have so much cash in the bank that you can ride those waves. But like as being more of a, because you get 2 kinds of startups now. You get the startups which are like more from a trading perspective, like you build your business based on cash flows, invoicing customers, and you get the Silicon Valley startups, the guys who are raising oodles of cash by having a coffee table conversation. In fact, I was in San Francisco last year, and it was just like completely changed my perspective. I'll get to that now. But the funny thing was, like, literally guys would get $500,000, $1 million over a coffee table idea.
Yeah, the $1 million coffee.
It's insane, and you can't contextualize that to what we live here. The contrast to that was when I went over there, is they said South African entrepreneurs have got a great reputation. Everyone, and we met a lot of people, and it's because we have this ability to hustle. We make a plan, so we don't start like curling up into a ball when the going really does get tough, and we build fundamental strong businesses. Because you can be profitable and be a good business. Doesn't mean that you have to carry on chowing more investor money until you get to profitability. That all comes. But yeah, it's just, I think a lot of entrepreneurs have this illusion that that's what entrepreneurship is, and that's really not what it is. There are some other elements of entrepreneurship that Silicon Valley doesn't really portray.
Which is the pain, essentially. I mean, I did a keynote just early, I think, when was it, Mav? Like Monday or Tuesday or something at FMB Conference Center. So I was doing a whole talk around, change and how you can adapt and so forth. And one of the slides about why I started the Matt Brown Show was basically that these headlines, like on TechCrunch and stuff, is like, Nestle funds $77 million in new startup called Freshly. Bike sharing battle heats up.
Bike sharing. I mean, that for me, I'm subscribed to a ticker. So every single night I get like the deal flow that happens over there. And I mean, bike sharing is nuts. I saw a dog walking platform, which I think there's value in someone walking your dog, especially if you're busy. But they raised $25 million.
Yeah, no, but this is exactly my point, dude.
It's crazy.
But this is nuts, bro. We're living in, and I'm not dissing them. I think the fact that if you can raise $25 million for Uber, for pet sitters and dog walkers and stuff, then hats off to you and well fucking done. And I'll happily have you come on my show and we'll tell your story. You know what I'm saying? Like legit. Like I think that's awesome.
And I've got many friends who've done that successfully, and that's the thing. It's just like, and those businesses do scale. There you need lots of money to scale. But I think the more fundamental problem is not that they are getting the money; it's that the deal flow doesn't go to the guys who also could be eligible for money. I mean, one of my biggest gripes around that VC world is that there is hardly any liquidity for you to get access to good money for you to grow your business, especially in South Africa.
Yeah. So this is totally true. So that's what Benji Kutsia says from Empty Trips. She's been on my show a few times. And so basically she was saying the ironic thing about South African venture capitalists is that they don't actually venture. Like
it's private equity.
Like I spoke to Clive Butko last week, in fact, from Kalon Venture Partners, and he was banging on about how two investments in his portfolio were just literally shooting the lights out. But he turned down, I'm probably not supposed to say this stuff, but let's just say that there was one company that was doing what I would regard as incredibly well, and he binned them. Do you know what I mean? Like, they're so ruthless. VC money, like that. Listen, they're there for a 20, 30x return. Do you know what I'm saying?
No, of course.
But with going back to the headline thing, it's like it has its place. But if you're in South Africa, you don't have that opportunity. We don't have a 300-400 million consumer market, right? That's why if you're a startup, most startups here take SnapScan, for instance, they go to corporates to die. Essentially, because if you want 6 million customers overnight,
you need to going
back to partnerships. You go to Standard Bank, right? And you go and sell that IP to them, and off you go, right? You get a 4-year earn-out agreement, whatever the case might be, and then you go and start your next business, right? True or false? So the thing with those headlines, though, is that it doesn't paint the realities on the ground. Like basically, it's like this. The impression is, the perception that those headlines create is that you'll start a business and then 6 months later you'll sell that business for $100 million. You'll move to the south of France on your $50 million super yacht and you'll be doing Bolivian cocaine with a bunch of Russian supermodels, right? And congratulations, because you know what, next year you can do it all over again and buy a bigger yacht. Do you know what I'm saying? Yeah. But like it's like for every one of those headlines, there are hundreds of thousands of crushed dreams. Do you know what I'm saying?
Absolutely. I mean, that's the thing. And even over there, there's so many crushed dreams. It's timing, luck. Someone needs to like you. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's relentless. By no means someone raising $25 million would have been easy. It would have had 20 different pitch decks. The problem is that the opportunity for them was they have the audience and they have the risk appetite that doesn't really exist here.
Yeah, totally. Jonathan Koda was on my show. He was smashing cupcakes here the other day. But he was basically leaving in his car, and he said to me, entrepreneurship for him is actually about pain. That's what it's actually about. It's not about the sexy cars and the McLarens and all that shit. And it's
your
nice.
ability to take the pain.
Yeah, dude, and to like push through that shit, you know. And that's why I started the show, was to basically, I mean, it's morphed into this massive other thing now. I'm trying to work out like what to do with it, but it's doing a lot of good because people are starting to get it, you know. And I keep saying it's actually around like questions largely, you know. I want to get into block starters now with you, but basically, if we're living in a world that's changing so much, like how do you remain relevant? And it's really about asking the right questions. And so people always say to me, oh, but don't you like the notoriety? Or, you know, I get people saying, geez, your exposure is immense. Like, how do you, like, please, can I come on your show? And I'm like, well, sorry, no, like, whatever, there's reasons for that. But for me, it's about, there's listeners right now in 100 countries around the world. And if I can inspire just one of them to start a business, tech, doesn't matter, energy, become the next Tim Ohlsen, like that for me stacks, right? Because at least they get the real information about what's happening on the ground,
and not the glorified version, not the story of, you know, it's so easy and you can make a killing, you're going to raise tons of money. It's about like the hard grind that you need to go through and all the ups and the downs that you need to take to actually persevere.
Yeah, the failed marriages, the fact that you can't relate to your kids, that you miss recitals, sports games and stuff like that, because it is an all-consuming thing. To make it, you really do need to sacrifice far more than just capital. It's your happiness in many instances, right? It's your time, it's your relationships. Like, and even then, there's no guarantee that you'll make it.
Yeah, exactly. There's never any guarantee. There's no safety net.
Yeah, not at all. What, Mav?
Just the floor. You can just see the floor.
Have you given him some volume there? Okay. Put Mav's mic on, shame.
He's just chuckling in the background.
What do you want, Mav?
Bronte says that you seem like the Iron Man of South Africa.
Where is he? He's on YouTube. Yes, how's it, Bronte? How are you doing,
That's
bud?
hilarious.
So look, I think what I want to do is get into the Injustice League. So this I'm super excited about. We're going to take the Injustice League to the next level today. So Tim, while the guys are going to get set up for you swinging this baseball bat, what is the one injustice that you see in the world? Like, what is that thing that you're going to take your frustration out on today?
So it's obviously very close to what I do in the world that I live in, which is around energy. We are currently doing a whole bunch of things around the network because basically the network hasn't changed in the last 100 years since electricity was invented. It's very archaic. It's very centralized. There are a lot of changes, and blockchain is a great technology that kind of disrupts that sort of incumbent system that we all kind of accept at this stage. But really in Africa, you know, we got over 600 million people who don't have access to electricity. And
as in no electricity.
No electricity.
So
and
in the dark, essentially.
They literally live in the dark. The irony is that they would walk 5-10 kilometers a day to charge their cell phone, because all of these users have cell phones. Africa's got one of the highest cell phone penetrations in the world. But if you think about them, those guys also unbanked. They don't even have bank accounts. They deal in cash. And that's why things like M-Pesa, which is mobile money in like East Africa, really took off, because it kind of empowered them to start transacting without having to worry about where am I getting the cash from. You know, it's just USSD over to another phone. But you have all of these people who basically don't have access. And if they don't have access, they're using kerosene lights, which, you know, isn't healthy for their kids studying.
Fire hazards. And also the fumes. I mean, it has huge health implications. But then you also think about what electricity is. Electricity is almost, in a way, it should be a human right, because without electricity, you're nowhere. You're not connected. You're not connected to the rest of the world, and internet kind of like changed the view on globalization, right? In fact, I watched a TED talk back like in 2009, and was Sergey Brin from Google. And literally they simulated the globe. So like it was like awesome animation around all the Google traffic. Like you could see like, you know, pinging from San Francisco to like Germany, and then Germany to Johannesburg. But then they dialed the globe towards Africa. Oh, dude, I've seen that, and it's black.
And it's black. And he says, this is what we want to focus on. Because the reason why it's black is because there's no access to electricity, no reliable access to electricity. I mean, lots of places also still have diesel, but that's expensive. So guys are running tiny generators. But they said they want to focus on that, because as soon as you get someone electricity, you're empowering them, literally. They're suddenly going to get connected to the internet. They're suddenly going to have this wealth of information that all of us take for granted. And kind of starts potentially changing that society entirely going forward.
Yeah. So two things. One, I think universal basic income should also be a human right.
Huge, yeah, absolutely.
Access to energy. And the third thing there is around mobile phones and drinking water. You know, in Africa, there are more people with access or ownership of phones than they have access to clean drinking water. That's fucking sad.
That's a scary statistic.
In 2018, dude.
No, it's crazy.
It's nuts,
Yeah.
bro. That's why people don't understand, like Silicon Valley versus Africa.
You can't
compare
compare
them, bro.
You can't.
Yeah. Cool. So let's get on with it.
Okay.
So, dude, you can drop your mic there for me.
Just on the floor.
Just on the table, please. Oh, that's also fine. I'm going to get out the way. So just hold on. I'm going to put this this here light bulb in this safety net because we're all about health and safety. Okay. So, dude, you're going to swing this baseball bat. The bulb is around about there, yeah? And as you do that, I want you to just take your frustration out on the injustice of human beings not having access to affordable energy. Go for it, dude. Oh, that was legit, dude. In fact, were you like a sportsman in another life, eh?
I was practicing.
Yeah. I'm responsible for mass sales of baseballs in South Africa and baseball bats.
And now light bulbs.
Oh, that's awesome, dude. Thanks for that. So let's talk about block starters, dude. So
Cool.
blockchain and energy. This is uber exciting rather.
Yep.
Decentralization of centralized parastatals and having a young South African guy with network and experience to go and do that thing is probably a really awesome story to explore with you. So block starters, what is it? What's your vision around it?
It's basically a bunch of guys in a room.
What are they doing there, dude? You can't sell it like that.
What are they doing over there? No, so I'll tell you a bit of a background. So I'm not going to make this too long. So in our energy business, we've really struggled to find quality developers. Most of them do live in Cape Town, so like there is obviously good resources there. But in Joburg, they all get spoiled by the big corporates. So they get massive paychecks, and it's like makes it very hard for a startup and a small business to really compete and lure them into another environment because they just get comfortable. So my partner Dan and I, and actually we also should be talking about partnerships, really had this idea a couple of years ago to say, why don't we do an incubator? Why don't we just get a couple of guys, like set up a cool space for guys to basically sit, make it a tech incubator, and we get guys to actually come sit there. So we welcome their startups into the space and we can help them. I mean, not that like I said, I'm still learning. I'm going to continue to learn. I'm still making tons of mistakes in our business and my entrepreneurship journey. But why don't we just give them some support? Like, how do you do your legals? Like agreements, right? Where do you even go? How much do you have to pay? Sometimes you can actually, kind of subsidize costs because you already have had some form of framework. So we just thought if we can lure them in with that kind of notion, we could maybe attract some interesting talent, guys who love entrepreneurship, guys who like being in the startup space. So that's really where it came from. And then when the whole blockchain boom or crypto boom happened last year, we thought, why don't we just make it blockchain specific? So it's not capitalizing on the current gold rush around trading crypto. So I'm not going to give any trading advice here whatsoever.
No
but
one's
it's about
listening, dude.
crickets. It's about the technology itself and what that technology can do across industry. Because literally it has so many use cases. It also has so many non-use cases. A lot of people have suddenly like popped up as a startup say, we are on blockchain and we do this. And you go, does it really have a use case for blockchain? Is it worth it? So those are always the questions that you need to ask. But basically what we want to do around Block Starters, which is our co-working space and blockchain incubator, is to try and get people who are in the space, who buy into the movement of what blockchain is, into the same environment. So we can collaborate, we can share ideas, we can share talent, we can solve problems. Because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if you are in consumer services and energy, financial services, whatever the industry application is, you're still dealing with the fundamental foundation of blockchain is the technology. And there's still so much around blockchain that is not understood. There's still so much growth that needs to happen, in terms of scalability. And all of these things kind of like make it a very early stage community that we just want to capitalize on and just bring guys close to us, see how we can assist them if we can. A lot of the guys know what they're doing, which is great, but really just make it a home and be known for a home for blockchain startups.
Okay. So I've been there. I've met quite a few of the guys. It's been really rad. And obviously we've been courting around this thing called Block Week, which would be essentially because I believe like that, I totally agree with you. I think it's very embryonic. I think there was a lot of narrative that drove, obviously, thanks to the Bitcoin price, and a lot of people lost a lot of money.
Ton of money. Yeah.
No one's talking about that shit. That's what Clive was actually saying to me now. He was like, dude, everyone's talking about AI, man, and and robotics and stuff like that. Like also exponential technologies, but the steam out of crypto is gone. And that's okay for now.
It's the speculation behind it, right?
That was a big. I never liked that. I mean, I know I covered it with Rand and so forth from Crypto Trader, but it was relevant at the time because people were just they were like taking out second fucking mortgages on their homes and stuff and credit cards just to go in the next gold rush, and so, I mean, there was one guy I spoke to, he literally liquidated his 2 kids' college funds to put it into Bitcoin. I mean, like, it was bad. Yeah. So I'm having lunch with these guys and so forth, and I'm like, no, man. And that's why I did it, because it was all around helping, people.
It's the educational part.
That's it, man.
Yeah, you want to tell people, because people are interested, but I think now the education, especially on the trading side, is more cautionary. Regulation is what you're investing in actually a credible platform and idea, and it's so difficult to do evaluation on it because it's just the 4 of us could now just suddenly come up with a great idea and put up a nice website, right? I mean, that's what the market was. It's not that anymore this year.
Yeah, ICOs.
Exactly. So, and that was the pump. A lot of that.
Yeah, I mean, reverse ICOs now and inside out ICOs and
actually, please tell me about your inside out ICO.
So it was just me being a dick because I call bullshit on if I see stuff and I'm like, this is such fucking marketing. It's like the cloud. It's just
big
a computer
data.
somewhere else.
No, of course.
It's not actually in the sky. Like, come on. But people believe that shit. It's like, oh, where's your cloud, my bro? No, it's in the North Equator. I think it's 33 degrees north, 17 minutes south, and it's moving west. No, it's just a computer on the fucking internet. So anyway, so just going back to blockchain and so forth, like energy though, very interesting, right? So, I have this incubator, and I kind of got sort of distracted, but we're talking about Block Week because I think there's a huge play for media. I think there's Coin Insider.
Education,
Nick Haralamis is playing there. But I don't think anyone's really taking that by the horn yet. Having said that, no one's really taking energy by the horn either. Right? So
there are players,
I know,
course,
but who's actually who's that guy, right? So let's talk about Eldo. Like, I know your business quite well because we're talking about doing some stuff together, but could you share with us what you can around the token economy and how you potentially see or don't see affordable energy being enabled through decentralization from a company like Eldo? What does that look like?
Sure. So I'm going to speak in an African context, and then I'm going to speak in terms of like the global industry. Yeah. So just like I said earlier, access to electricity isn't there because there's no infrastructure, right? So for a equivalent of an ESCOM in DRC or in Ethiopia to run power lines that go kilometers and it costs like $100,000 per K to put up power lines, it just doesn't become economically viable to connect 1,000 village homes. So it kind of like you're always dead in the water. So this whole notion of a centralized network is changing in our utility infrastructure. It's not about I produce power here, I distribute it, and here's my customer. It's like you could have a customer over there that is so far away from your power source that you will never be able to commercially viably supply them with electricity. So what do? You build a power there. And you build it based on what he needs. You don't need to build it for what the entire network needs. So we're moving away from the central system, and it's effectively called embedded generation. It's industry understood. It's nothing groundbreaking really. But where I think the whole blockchain element in terms of the infrastructure becomes very, very interesting, and this is one of the things that we're looking at doing, is how we can change the ownership of utility infrastructure in Africa. Because everything is parastatal owned, so everything is a monopoly. If they are inefficient and they're not able to collect money from their customers, becomes like a death spiral. In fact, it's a known term. It's called the utility death spiral.
So it's an actual thing.
It's an actual thing.
And for centralized utilities, right?
For African utilities.
Oh, for African. Yeah. So that's where ESCOM is, right?
Yeah.
Or do you think that
ESCOM is the largest, but their problem kind of persists even with the smaller guys in other African countries.
In municipalities or
municipalities got other problems, but their death spirals
everywhere you turn, it's a nightmare.
But for you to solve that problem, you need a lot of money. It's an infrastructure play. So one of the things that we're ideating is how we can crowdfund infrastructure. We don't do it using a utility token, ironically. It would become more of a security itself.
Got you.
To actually enable the rollout and the management of the infrastructure properly. Using software, using IoT type technology, which is really, I'm using a buzzword, so I don't like using it, but kind of I think we'll give an illustration, because what we effectively do in our core business is metering. It's collecting data from different meters across the entire network and try and A, collect from the customer accurately, but B, also monitor what's happening in that network so that you can effectively manage what you are measuring, because without the data, you are dead in the water. So
how do you know what to charge?
Yeah, exactly. How do you know where your losses are? How do you know where your theft is occurring?
Yeah.
And, that's one of the bizarre things. Like, our networks are so complicated and they kind of underpin everything that we run. Our homes, our businesses, entire economies are run off this infrastructure. But access to data is a big problem.
Yeah. Well, if you take IoT, because it's a rad buzzword. I've never
Big data, IoT.
I've never actually used that on the show, IoT, before. Jeez, I must catch up, eh? But like, take Vodacom, right? Our calls keep dropping. This is South Africa's best network. And then they send you that stupid SMS that goes, we've noticed that you've had some dropped calls, bro. Here's 10 minutes and it expires in 24 hours. It's like, fuck you, bro. I pay you like 3-4 grand a month. And I can't even run my business.
And they won't even give you an SLA.
No, dude.
Yeah.
And it's completely, you're disempowered. Yeah. Do you know what I'm saying? But anyway, so if you think about the fact that just phone calls are like a thing that isn't exactly, 100% delivered all the time.
Yep.
Then they need a new network to deal with things like the Internet of Things and connected homes and smart devices. And
exactly.
Your fucking belt's talking to your watch, and your watch is talking to your glasses, and your glasses are talking to your fridge, and that's a shitload of data, right? Yeah. So, but
it's actually really small data, and that's the thing.
Because it's the volume, though.
It's the volume and the transaction cost.
Yeah.
Because having a SIM card on our phone that streams YouTube, right, is using a ton of data. Having a small sensor either on your wrist or at your door, that's kilobits of data over a month. So you can't charge the same rates that they would be charging now. So this is one of the things, like, it cannot be done using existing infrastructure. So communication, infrastructure, energy, all of those things are inherently linked because they actually are converging. So that's the big thing for us. We effectively are coining ourselves a smart grid network operator. It's kind of taking these elements of our legacy infrastructure underpinned with smart devices that allows us to communicate in close to real time as possible with reliable communication infrastructure, and we bolt on consumer services on top. So it's a mouthful.
Yeah. No, I got all of that. Did you get that? Yeah. Anyone else?
But almost think about our existing networks having this software layer on top, and you can decide who you transact with. So if you suddenly put PV on your roof, you want to sell it to your neighbor, you should be allowed to do that. Regulation is a big barrier to enable that kind of business model, but things will change. But there also are more fundamental things that our networks are becoming more transactional. Yeah. So it's just a matter of time.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. But look, I mean, when you've got rolling blackouts, during winter, and you've got a baby, right, and she's freezing her ass off, and she's 2 weeks old, and your wife's in your ear about Eskom and stuff like that, and you know what I mean? Like, that's kind of the thing that, like, if Eldo X or insert company came and went, knock, 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 we've got this thing, and you can choose now who you get your electricity from. And because, quite frankly, dude, I don't give a flying fuck where it comes from. I just want to have my power. You just
want to have, and also you want to trust your utility provider that they provide you their service, and that they bill you properly.
But then they misappropriate 6.5 billion. Explain that to me.
You can't explain that. That's the problem, right?
So then how do you change it? Because you're basically what you're saying. I'm getting animated now, so I apologize. No, actually I don't. But like, you're fighting a system that's been in place for God knows when, dude. Like,
100%.
How do you change it, bro? You've got corrupt officials at the top. Like, it's a system that, by all accounts, you will never change, right? It's highly, highly, highly unlikely. You almost need to just say, okay, is the way that it is, and we're going to pitch up with this new thing. And hey, you know what? If it's that much of a pain point for you as the consumer, like, choose us. We can. Yeah. I mean, by the way, if it is securities tokens or what have you, and you do have some form of measuring the data, et cetera, and you can deliver a proof of concept service, and it starts to fly, like, do you even need regulation? Think about, I mean, I don't know. Like, where does the buck stop between traditional infrastructure, even though you're solving a traditional problem? The way that you're suggesting that you're going to solve it will be completely different. It will be like technology or digital, right? So, or digital technology, blockchain, token securities, etc., whatever, right? All language consumers will never understand. But for you, do you really care about regulation? Because quite frankly, I imagine that there's a shitload of consumers in South Africa right now who don't care about regulation.
They don't care because they're fed up. But the problem is, for service providers like us, we are bound by the regulation. So
are you though?
You are, because literally,
have you gone down?
We've had solar PV systems on businesses and homeowners' roofs that we had to throttle. So it's a technical term where you basically look at how much is being generated, how much you're consuming, and how much do we need to almost like kill, so that you are losing power because you don't want to push back into the network so you can sell the power to your neighbor. Or even your neighbor would get it for free. Eskom would be getting free, and then the municipality would be getting free electricity. So that gives you like an idea of how bizarre the regulation is. And it is changing, but it needs a national change. So right now, the biggest focus for us, and it goes back to, why are we having blackouts? Right? It's because they are not maintaining the infrastructure, and it's because they're not able to collect from their customers. In Eskom's case, it's the municipalities. They were Eskom 30 billion. The number changes, but let's say 30 billion, right?
Well, who knows?
Do you know how much?
What did they spend today?
Do you know how much the customers own the municipalities? Over 100 billion. So this problem just gets kicked down the road, and it does stop at the consumer. So the first thing that we want to do, and we're currently doing, is helping them collect. Help them collect their money so that they start improving service delivery, and they can start upgrading their networks, and they turn themselves around. Because you know that debt spiral I was talking about?
Yeah.
That's the floor. They're already on the floor. Like, this is no longer like 2005 where, energy supply was a problem. This is now a revenue crisis. People are not collecting, and as a result of that, they're not able to operate their networks.
I don't get it, man. I just get very scared.
Yeah, it's a massive problem. It's a massive infrastructure problem.
Like in Joburg, your economic heartbeat of the country doesn't have power. I mean, really?
Yeah, it's bizarre.
What future is there?
Of course.
Do you know what I'm saying? Like, it scares people, dude. Like, especially entrepreneurs, man, when they've got a bit of cash. And I mean, like, I'm looking at Brad and Mav, and I'm thinking about their futures. You know what I'm saying?
The younglings.
Yeah, dude, the youngsters, bro. And like, they're going to inherit this thing, and I don't know. I think energy in South Africa, and more broadly Africa, needs someone a la Elon Musk, cuts out of that same threshold where he's prepared to risk everything to redefine entire industries, like what Elon's done with cars and solar power and space travel and so forth. Do you know what I'm saying? You need that here, because if you're not that guy, like, there is no chance.
Yeah, no, it's a massive problem, and you've got many, many battles to fight. Our business model is very unique. It's an evolution. It's something that happens over a period of time, because it's not a switch. It's a massively intensive capital element, and actually needs a lot of money. So the irony is, the business that I have now is sustainable. We've got customers, if they pay, when they pay.
I have customers who also don't pay me.
But we are in the process of raising money, and we'll probably continue to raise a lot more money.
How much are you raising? No.
We need between 500 to R1 billion over the next, I'd say, year.
And how far down that garden path are you kicking that can?
Close, and we're doing it iteratively, because also for you to be able to recruit the projects, you don't do them in a big bang. You basically, you're doing mass rollouts across a whole bunch of different places. So it is an iterative structure, but yes, we've got pipeline. We know where the customers are. We know where the business cases are, and we're putting them into a funding pipeline.
Sweet, dude. Should we do your Q&A? Mav, what's happening on the live stream there, bud?
Got some questions coming in. Shreya asks, does switching off your geyser really help?
It does. Your water.
No, it doesn't help Tim.
Yeah, it doesn't help me. In fact, everyone should dial up the geysers so that Eskom burns more. No,
don't tell anyone.
Yeah, it does help, but your geyser basically has a routine where it fires up the element, and that's when your usage picks up again. A heat pump is obviously far more efficient, so there's not much you can get out of an existing geyser. It is without getting too technical, it's resistive, which means that it basically runs current through the steel rod, and that creates heat. So it's a very inefficient way of using energy. But yes, it does, slightly.
Ronaldo asks, does SA have the infrastructure to support self-driving cars?
No. Not
Next
yet.
question.
Not yet.
But that's devastating for me, because like if and when I move to the States, which by the way, I'm going to just jump in this one thing here. So Brent Spitty put this tweet out yesterday, and he's like, every conversation he's had in the last 2 weeks has been about, and he coaches entrepreneurs, right? The heartbeat of the country sort of thing, economically. And he was saying like every single conversation's involved immigration. Every single one, dude.
It's a hot topic for a number of reasons now.
So I'd be devastated, right, if I was forced to stay in South Africa and I couldn't get a Tesla, like a Model 3. You know what I'm saying? Like just to have it and push fucking ludicrous mode and put my foot down. Do you know what I mean? I don't care about the puddles, dude. I just want the power, dude.
Well, that's another thing. We actually need charging stations everywhere. You need electric highways because, look, the funny thing is when Nissan launched the Leaf, I mean, that's the least sexy EV car that you can get.
Death trap, hashtag.
Yeah, exactly. Within 3 years, they sold the same number of cars that BMW sold within the first month of releasing the i3.
It's nuts, yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy. And the price, it's because the Nissan was a lot more expensive, or actually was slightly cheaper than the i3, but the BMW just had so much more brand appeal. So it shows you the power of the brand. But we need infrastructure first. We need charging stations. You want to go to a mall, you don't want to have to like stress about, am I going to get home? Because if I get stuck, I really get stuck, right? And we've got to remember, Tesla's not a hybrid. Tesla's a electric vehicle only. That's it. You plug in and that's it.
What do you think i8 owners, what do you think keeps them up at night? Is it the fact that they can only go short distances, or, because I mean, what is the range on that?
I think it's the depreciation on their car that keeps them up at night.
What does that cost, that i8? You'll know, roughly.
1.8, but you drive it off the floor and you get 1.2.
Okay, well, like most new cars, right? I suppose. Okay, next one.
While we're on the subject of cars, can we go on a spin with them?
I'll let you guys go. Sure. Yeah.
Okay. Ashton asks, how did you and the co-founders get to the concept of block starters?
It literally was a coffee table idea where we said, we've got the space, why don't we use it? Why don't we try and make it a friendly space for blockchain startups to come and meet? So it's not fintech, it's like blockchain as a whole. And we try and get some stability into this whole industry that's emerging, like stability and credibility. And the biggest boon for me in my experience at Blockstarters was that the concept is so novel and so friendly that allows you to have a whole bunch of different conversations that you wouldn't have been able to have. So you can meet with the regulators, you can meet with the banks, you can meet with the law firms, and you're not selling your business to them. Saying this is an ecosystem. We want you to be associated so that you get some benefit, but the startups also get benefit. And it allows us all collectively to actually help the industry and shape the industry, and hopefully also shape regulation.
Awesome.
His follow-up question is, how has the journey been so far?
In Blockstarter specifically? Crazy. The feedback we've been getting has been really awesome. Everyone loves it. We've got some really cool startups who've joined our course, and we're hoping to grow the model. So we realize that this is a great model for South Africa, but we're also looking at how we can potentially expand it, because that's really where you can make a bigger difference. But yeah, really awesome experience, met amazing bunch of entrepreneurs. For me, the really cool thing is that being an entrepreneur and being stuck in my business and then being exposed to the startup businesses and block starters kind of gives you some good exposure too. Yeah, really, really exciting time, and definitely look into blockchain as a technology if you haven't done already.
When are we doing all your media for you, bud? Yeah.
Well, you need an office, right?
Probably.
We got some space.
We're growing.
Yeah, we got some space.
Okay, are we good? Okay, dude, last question for you, bud. Yeah. Like, why do you do what you do? Like, what gets Tim Ohlsen out of bed in the morning?
It's, like what people often will say is that they'll do it because they just like want to make a difference. And like, yeah, that's important. But I love the journey, and I love the ability to do something that is difficult to do, and like getting to that milestone or working through multiple milestones to get to that final milestone. But yeah, it's the challenge. I mean, if you're not in it for the journey, you're gonna struggle through that pain. You're not gonna make it.
Trust the process.
Exactly.
Tim, dude, awesome chat, bro.
Awesome.
Fucking
Good to see you,
immense,
Matt.
bro. That was rad.
Yeah.
Very cool. Great show.
Thanks, guys.
And wishing you, Eldo, and mate, Blockstarters all the very best. It's super exciting to see what you do, and hopefully you can fix all of our rolling blackout problems at some point.
Hopefully.
Guys, thanks for checking in on the live stream. Always great to have you guys participate. So this is the Matt Brown, and I'll see you again soon. Cheers.
Cheers, guys.